He stood up in a
Accept my
ballroom
ex,
filled with
or the
200
wedding is
guests
off.
and destroyed his relationship in one sentence. Accept my
Accept
ex,
my ex,
or the wedding is
or
off.
the wedding is off.
Everyone expected the bride-to-be to break. But instead, she smiled, said okay, and walked away like a queen walking out of a kingdom she no longer needed. Hours later, still wearing her torn engagement dress, a stranger knocked on her door, carrying the one secret her fiancé never saw coming. A secret that would turn the woman he tried to humiliate into the woman the world would one day fear, admire, and follow. But everything changed the moment their paths crossed again. So what happens when the man who broke her becomes the man who seeks her forgiveness, and she has to choose between mercy, memory, and the empire she built? Keep watching. Welcome my beautiful family and friends to my YouTube channel. Please click on subscribe, like, share, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now back to the story. The ballroom glowed like a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers spilled warm light over white roses, gold-rimmed glasses, and 200 elegantly dressed guests who believed they had come to witness the happiest night of Karen Smith's life. Music whispered through the air, a soft, romantic melody meant for a celebration of love. It was the kind of night little girls dream of, the kind of night women sacrifice years for, the kind of night where everything was supposed to be perfect. Karen stood at the center of it all in a dress she had worked overtime shifts to afford. A soft ivory gown, delicate beating at the waist, and a train that flowed like liquid pearl. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times. The laughter, the photos, the promise of forever. Her fiancé, Joe Scott, had been charming all evening, polished, confident, effortlessly social. His parents glowed with pride. Her own mother dabbed her eyes repeatedly, whispering blessings under her breath. Karen's sister, Diane, hovered nearby with a phone ready to capture every second. And Karen? She smiled until her cheeks burned. She believed she was stepping into the future she had prayed for. She had no idea the next 5 minutes would end her old life forever. It began with a small sound, a champagne glass tapping against silver. Clink, clink, clink. The soft chatter dissolved instantly. All heads turned toward Joe, who stood at the front of the room, smiling like a man preparing to make the speech of his life. Karen's chest bloomed with warmth. He's on toast to us, she thought. To our future. To our love. She stepped toward him instinctively, her heart swelling. Then Joe inhaled, and the air around him changed. His smile slipped into something rehearsed, cold, calculated. Like he wasn't celebrating love, but preparing to announce something. Something heavy. Something dangerous. A few guests felt it too. A murmur rippled across the tables. Diane, from across the room, stiffened. Joe cleared his throat and raised his glass high. Thank you all for being here tonight, he began. I want to be completely honest with everyone, especially with Karen. The word honest hit Karen strangely. It wasn't warm. It wasn't loving. It sounded like a warning. Her fingers tightened around her champagne glass. Then Joe said the words that detonated the room. My ex stays in my life. Accept it, or the engagement is off. Silence slammed into the ballroom so forcefully it felt as if the chandeliers themselves trembled. No one moved. No one breathed. A woman gasped. Someone's fork clattered onto a plate. Karen stood perfectly still, frozen not because she was weak, but because she couldn't yet comprehend the knife he had just plunged into her dignity. Joe continued, as if reading lines from a script. And I have a long history, he said confidently. I can't just cut her off. I'm not going to pretend she doesn't matter. So, Karen, he turned toward her. If you can accept that my ex will remain in my life, actively, then we can move forward with the wedding. If not, then we end things tonight. The guests stared at him with a mix of disbelief and morbid fascination. Karen's mother covered her mouth, eyes wide with shame and fear. Joe's own mother nearly fainted, whispering, Joseph, what are you doing? In the far corner, Diane's hands clenched in a fist so tight her knuckles whitened. She braced herself to storm the stage and end the man on sight. But everything rested on one woman, Karen, and all 200 guests turned toward her to witness the spectacle. They waited for the tears, the breakdown, the humiliation. They wanted a scene. They expected it. But she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She didn't crumble into the trembling, broken woman the room anticipated. Instead, something ancient and powerful rose inside her. A calm, a certainty, a strange clarity that blooms only when a heart realizes the person standing in front of it has just revealed everything it needed to know. Karen slowly lifted her head and looked at Joe, not as her fiancé, but as a stranger wearing the mask of a partner. She saw arrogance. She saw entitlement. She saw a man who thought love meant possession, and humiliation was acceptable if it served his ego. And in that moment, she made a decision that would change her life forever. Karen smiled, not a sarcastic smile, not a trembling one, a peaceful, steady, breathtakingly calm smile that unsettled the entire room more than tears ever could. "All right," she said softly. Her voice rang through the ballroom, clear, sharp, undisturbed. A judge delivering a final verdict. Then she set down her champagne glass with a delicate clink that echoed like a gavel. And she walked, not ran, not stumbled, not broken. She walked with her spine straight, her chin raised, each footstep a drumbeat of dignity on the marble floor. Guests parted instinctively, as if the force of her self-respect pushed them aside. Even the air seemed to move out of her way. If you believe humiliation is abuse, hit like, the villain won't. Outside, the night greeted her with cold air and freedom. Diane sprinted after her. Karen, wait. Are you okay? Are you seriously okay? Because if you wanted to go back in there and remove his head from his shoulders, I swear I'll." But Karen wasn't breaking. Her dress was torn where someone had accidentally stepped on it as she passed. Her makeup was smudged. Her life, as she knew it, was collapsing behind her. And yet, her face was calm, peaceful, certain. "No," Karen said. "I'm not hurt. I'm awake." Diane pressed a hand to her chest. "You're scaring me. Shouldn't you be crying? Screaming? Something." "I thought I'd be devastated," Karen said quietly. "Instead, I feel relieved." She exhaled slowly, like she had been underwater for years and had finally surfaced. "That man showed me exactly who he is before I legally tied my life to him. That's not heartbreak. That's mercy." The sisters sat in the car in stunned silence, the ballroom's music still faintly bleeding through the walls, as if mocking the end of the evening. But the night wasn't over. Not even close. Back at their tiny apartment, Karen collapsed onto the couch. Her dress, once the symbol of her dreams, felt like a costume now, suffocating and heavy. She wanted to rip it off, but she couldn't bring herself to move yet. Everything hurt, not because Joe broke her, but because she was realizing how long she had shrunk herself to fit into his world. Diane paced like a mother wolf. "Do you want ice cream? Wine? Weapons? I can arrange any of the three." Before Karen could answer, a knock echoed through the apartment. A slow, deliberate knock. Both sisters froze. Karen wiped her face and opened the door. A man stood there. Silver hair, leather briefcase, a suit far too expensive for a midnight visit. "Miss Karen Smith?" he asked gently. "Yes. I apologize for disturbing you at this hour. My name is Richard Sterling. I'm your grandmother's attorney." Karen blinked. "My grandmother? My grandmother died years ago." 3 months ago, he corrected. "And she left a very specific instruction. I was to deliver this information to you the moment you made yourself emotionally available to receive it." Emotionally available? How would a woman she hadn't seen since childhood know she was available for anything? Karen's head spun. Diane whispered behind her, "This night is cursed." Richard stepped inside and opened his briefcase. "I'm here because your grandmother, Phyllis Smith, left you her entire estate." Karen frowned. "Estate? As in what? Her house? Some old jewelry?" Richard shook his head slowly. "No, Miss Smith. Your grandmother built a real estate and hospitality empire over decades. Discreetly, quietly. She did not publicize her wealth. She did not trust many." He pushed papers across the table. Hotels, land listings, corporate documents, bank accounts, line after line of dizzying numbers. Finally, he placed the valuation in front of her. Karen stared and stared. and stared. 800 million? Her voice cracked for the first time that night. Yes, he said softly. You are now the sole owner of Smith Luxury Resorts and all attached properties. Diane fainted so dramatically she nearly hit her head on the coffee table. Karen sat frozen, hands trembling, her breath unsteady. Why me? She whispered. She didn't even speak to us. Richard opened a worn leather-bound journal, her grandmother's handwriting filling every page. She followed your life from afar, he said. Every achievement, every struggle, every heartbreak. She always intended to restore what she'd damaged in the family. This, he tapped the papers, was her way. Karen picked up the journal with trembling fingers. The last entry read, May my granddaughter never be powerless. May she never shrink herself for anyone. May she walk boldly into the life I couldn't give her. Tears finally spilled, not from humiliation, but from the realization that someone who barely knew her had believed in her more than the man she almost married. In a single night, Karen went from dismissed to destiny, from humiliated to heir, from broken to immeasurably powerful. Comment dignity first if you'd have walked out too. Karen closed the journal. Her entire life, every insecurity, every compromise, every tear she had shed in silence, felt different now. Joe had tried to reduce her. Life had tried to limit her. Pain had tried to bury her. But survival? Survival made her unstoppable. Diane sat up from the floor, rubbing her head. Karen, do you realize what this means? Joe humiliated a billionaire tonight. Karen wiped the last of her tears. No, he humiliated a woman who didn't know she was a billionaire yet. And that's worse. They burst into hysterical laughter. Because sometimes humor is the only way to hold the weight of destiny. Karen looked down at her engagement dress, her old life stitched into every thread. She stood, walked to her bedroom, and hung the dress neatly in her closet, not as a memory of pain, but as a reminder of the night she chose herself. Of a night everything shifted. Of a night she stepped into a story far bigger than anything she ever imagined. She stared at her reflection in the mirror. No ring, no partner, no fairy tale. Just a woman with a shattered past and an empire waiting. And for the first time in her life, Karen didn't feel small. She felt inevitable. Subscribe if you think Joe crossed a line no partner should ever cross. The morning after the engagement fiasco, the world felt different. Not brighter, not softer, just clearer. Karen woke up with the weight of her grandmother's empire on her shoulders and the ghost of last night still lingering in the back of her throat. But there was no pain, just purpose, just fuel. She showered slowly, letting the cold water shock her system awake. Today was the day she would step into a world she wasn't raised for, but somehow felt made for. Her old life had ended on a marble ballroom floor. Her new life began with a briefcase sitting on her kitchen table, a briefcase containing nearly $1 billion worth of responsibility. Are you ready? Diane asked, adjusting her blazer as if she were the one about to walk into a boardroom of titans. No, Karen said truthfully, and then she smiled. But I'm going anyway. They stepped outside into a world that had no idea it was about to meet its newest storm. A car waited for them. Not the cheap rideshare she used to take to work. A black limousine with tinted windows and a driver who greeted her by name. Good morning, Miss Smith. The executives are expecting you. Executives. Her executives. Karen inhaled sharply. The limousine rolled toward the tallest building downtown, a steel and glass giant with a name she had never noticed before, Smith International Holdings. Her grandmother's name. Her name now. Inside the lobby, marble floors reflected chandeliers. People wore suits that cost more than Karen's monthly rent. Security stood at every corner like silent guardians. She felt small for half a second. Then she squared her shoulders. You belong here, Diane whispered. You just don't know it yet. The elevator opened onto the 70th floor, the executive suite. A dozen suits turned all at once to see the young woman stepping out of the elevator like a phoenix disguised as a rookie. Ms. Smith, said a tall, composed woman in a navy blue suit. I'm Olivia Grant, Chief Operating Officer. We've been waiting for you. Olivia's handshake was firm, respectful, but laced with curiosity. A billionaire heir who worked night shifts? A woman who owned an empire she'd never set foot in? A nobody who suddenly became everybody? The room held its breath. "Let's begin," Karen said, and she stepped into the boardroom. The table was long, sleek, intimidating. Men and women with decades of experience watched her closely. Some hopeful, some skeptical, some waiting for her to fail. Karen took her seat at the head of the table, and something inside her clicked, a click like destiny locking into place. Olivia opened the presentation. "This," she said, "is the empire you now control." Slide after slide flashed across the screen. 124 luxury hotels, 34 resorts, 68,000 employees worldwide, a real estate portfolios in 6 countries, partnerships with governments, airlines, corporations. Karen's heart pounded. "This is too much," she whispered. "No," Olivia corrected softly. "This is your inheritance, and it's time you decided what to do with it." They spent hours breaking down numbers, debt, cash flow, management problems, hotel scandals, staff complaints, environmental issues. By noon, Karen's brain felt like cotton soaked in gasoline, heavy, volatile, ready to ignite. But something strange happened. She didn't drown in it. She swam. Every question sparked another. Every problem awakened curiosity. Every statistic called out to her like a challenge. Her grandmother had been watching her for a reason. She wasn't just lucky. She was ready. She just hadn't known it yet. At the end of the session, Olivia closed the files and met her eyes. "You're not overwhelmed," she said quietly. "You're hungry." Karen didn't deny it. For the next months, Karen disappeared from the world. Not in sadness, in evolution. Every morning, she woke at dawn and studied finance. Not basic finance, no. Institutional finance, international taxation, economic forecasting, capital management. Olivia arranged a training program. One-on-one coaching with analysts, lawyers, accountants. 12-hour sessions, 6 days a week. Karen didn't blink. She absorbed it like oxygen. When the executives doubted her, she showed up earlier, stayed later, asked harder questions. She wasn't here to be a figurehead. She was here to reign. And slowly, the boardroom changed. People leaned in when she spoke. People respected her insight. People began using sentences like, "Ms. Smith has a point. Let's hear Karen's perspective. She's right about the numbers." She was no longer the girl who got dumped in a room full of strangers. She was becoming a woman who controlled empires with her voice. When Karen finally felt she understood the machine, she began fixing it. 1. She raised wages across all hotels, much higher than minimum wage. Executives panicked. Analysts predicted cost disasters. Competitors celebrated, expecting her to fail. But the opposite happened. Staff turnover dropped. Customer reviews skyrocketed. Productivity soared. Unions praised her globally. Karen didn't apologize for compassion. She weaponized it. 2. She introduced mental health programs, childcare units, and career scholarships for workers' kids. People cried on live streams, thanking her. Former staff wrote letters saying, "You made me feel human again." Karen held onto each one. 3. She created emergency shelters hidden on the upper floors of several hotels. Not publicized, not advertised, not marketed. Quiet rooms where victims of domestic violence, trafficking survivors, and stranded women could stay safely and anonymously. Her grandmother had written, "Use wealth to protect the invisible." Karen honored it. 4. She revolutionized hotel training. Not serve the customer, but serve with dignity. Not obey your manager, but respect yourself. She replaced fear with confidence, replaced threats with empowerment. Her name became a whisper among workers. She gets it. She's one of us. She cares. Karen didn't want to be a queen. She wanted to be a guardian. And people noticed. News outlets exploded with coverage. Articles branded her the new face of ethical wealth, the youngest woman to lead a global hospitality empire, the billionaire who built safe havens for women. Interviews requested daily. Podcasts begged for her time. Women's groups called her a blessing. Workers called her a miracle. She became a national symbol, not for money, but for transformation, for hope, for dignity, for rising without destroying others. And for the first time in her life, Karen felt proud of herself in a way no relationship had ever made her feel. Across town, Joe Scott's life burned quietly. He had returned to his startup expecting investment opportunities, only to find out the lead investor pulled out after the incident at the engagement party went viral. People whispered behind his back. Hard workers stopped respecting him. His own team resented him. His parents, once beaming with pride, now refused to speak to him, ashamed of the public humiliation he had inflicted. His ex, the woman he claimed he needed so desperately, she blocked him, publicly, with a simple message. I'm not fighting another woman for you. Grow up. Joe's chest caved in. For the first time in his life, pride wasn't enough. Charm wasn't enough. Money wasn't enough. He spiraled. Sleepless nights, panic attacks, voicemails he never sent, apologies he didn't know how to deliver. Finally, he broke and sought therapy. And the therapist said the words that cracked him open. You want connection, but your ego blocks intimacy. He volunteered at a homeless shelter as part of his healing program. Not for public image, not for Karen, but because he needed to be useful again. Slowly, painfully, he became humble. He became human. But the one person he wished he could show his new self to, she had outgrown the version of him he was now trying to fix. Karen had avoided press for months, but now she was ready. She stepped onto the stage in a tailored white suit that made her look like the future incarnate. Cameras flashed. Reporters surged forward. Her presence commanded silence. Thank you for being here, she began. Her voice steady, calm, unbothered. I know many of you want to talk about how I inherited this empire, but that's not why we're here. She explained her reforms, her mission, her vision for the future of hospitality, how she intended to use wealth as a tool, not a weapon. Then she ended with a line that would echo across continents. Sometimes the worst betrayal pushes you toward your best life. The room erupted. Twitter exploded. TikTok stitched the sound clip into motivational edits. Magazines plastered her quote across covers. And in a small, dim kitchen across town, Joe watched the entire press conference alone. He leaned against the counter, hands trembling. Not out of jealousy, not out of anger, out of regret. He realized he had not lost a fiancé. He had lost a legend in the making. Tears slipped down his face. Not because he wanted her back, but because he finally understood she deserved a man who would have seen her value long before the world did. But Karen? She wasn't watching him. She wasn't thinking about him. She was building empires, changing lives, becoming the woman she was destined to be. And Karen never looked back. If you believe women rise stronger after betrayal, hit subscribe. We're building a community here. Comment, I stand with Karen, if you choose self-worth over humiliation. Share this if you're tired of men using honesty as an excuse to disrespect women. Time softens some memories and sharpens others. For Karen, the years that followed her rise didn't blur, they crystallized. The empire grew. The shelters expanded. Her grandmother's legacy became a global movement. Karen Smith was no longer a woman who inherited a dynasty. She became the woman who multiplied it. Hotels in 15 countries. Mentorship programs for young women. Scholarships for single mothers. A global safe haven initiative adopted by international organizations. They called her the Empire Healer. The billionaire with a heart. The woman who makes power feel safe. But Karen didn't do it for titles. She did it because she remembered what it felt like to be small. Invisible. Dismissed. Humiliated in front of 200 people. And she promised herself, never again. Not for her. Not for anyone. Years passed, and the world kept turning. But some stories wait quietly for their final chapter. And hers was about to meet the past one last time. It happened on an ordinary Thursday, in an ordinary part of town, in a building she had donated money to years earlier. Karen was visiting one of her foundation's new programs, an initiative that connected homeless youth with technology training. The center buzzed with energy, kids laughing, computers humming, mentors guiding teens through coding exercises. Karen walked through the main hall, speaking with staff, checking the progress of a new program, her presence commanding but warm. But then she heard a familiar voice behind her, a voice she had once memorized, a voice she once loved more than she loved herself, a voice that had broken her open and unintentionally set her free. Karen. It was soft, hesitant, not the confident tone she once knew. She turned, and there he was, Joe Scott, but not the Joe she remembered. This Joe was different. His posture humbled, his clothes simple, his eyes tired but kinder somehow, like life had carved away the arrogance and left a human being in its place. For a moment, neither spoke. Time held its breath. Then he exhaled. Wow, he whispered. You really became everything you were always meant to be. Karen didn't smile, but she didn't harden either. She simply nodded. What are you doing here? She asked gently. He motioned toward a group of kids playing chess in the corner. I volunteer here now, 3 days a week, sometimes 4. Karen blinked. Volunteering wasn't the Joe she remembered. This was new, quiet, grounded. You're different, she said softly. Joe nodded. I had to be. He swallowed. You inspired more change than you'll ever know, Karen. Not just in the world. In me. She waited, letting him unfold at his own pace. I'm not here for anything, he said quickly. I'm not trying to fix the past or rewrite what happened. I just wanted to say something I should have said years ago. He stepped closer, but careful not to invade her space. I'm sorry, he said. Sincerely, completely. Not the shallow apologies of men who fear consequences. This one carried weight. I'm sorry for humiliating you, for disrespecting you, for treating you like you were disposable. I was selfish, immature. I didn't understand what real partnership meant. I didn't know how to honor someone like you. His voice cracked, and I didn't deserve the version of you I had back then. Karen didn't flinch, didn't tremble, didn't hurt. The past no longer owned her. Thank you, she said after a moment, for saying that. Joe exhaled like he'd been holding the breath for years. I'd understand if you hate me. I don't, Karen said, and she meant it. Forgiveness wasn't weakness. Forgiveness was freedom. He nodded. I'm glad. Then came the pause, the crossroads where most stories begged for reconciliation. But Karen didn't feel a spark, not even a flicker, not anger, not longing, just peace. Joe, she said gently, you're a better man now. His eyes warmed with a fragile, hopeful flicker. But she shook her head with a soft, almost pitying smile. But not for me. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't cold, not heavy, just final. Your path is yours, she continued. Mine is bigger. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't superiority. It was truth. Joe lowered his gaze, not in shame this time, but acceptance. I figured, he said quietly. Karen nodded. I'm glad you changed, she said sincerely. I hope life treats you with the same kindness you're trying to give it now. Joe's eyes shone, not with tears, but with gratitude. Real gratitude. Thank you, he whispered. He extended his hand, hesitating. Karen took it, not like lovers, not like friends, but like two people who had finally laid a ghost to rest. Karen stepped back, and with the same quiet dignity she had used the night she left him years ago, she turned and walked away. Not bitter, not broken, not triumphant, complete. Her heels clicked softly across the polished floor, each step echoing like a heartbeat of finality. There was no music, no dramatic lighting, just a woman leaving a chapter behind with grace. Joe watched her go, not desperately, not regretfully, not with longing, with respect. She reached the door, paused, looked back. A small, warm smile, not for romance, but for closure, crossed her lips. He smiled back, and this time, it wasn't an apology. It was acceptance. Then she stepped outside, and the sun greeted her like an old friend. Karen returned to her life, not changed by the encounter, but affirmed by it. She supervised the launch of new safe house floors in 2 more hotels. She finalized partnerships with 3 global organizations supporting women escaping violence. She attended ribbon cuttings of new schools funded by her foundation. She met with employees whose lives were transformed by her reforms. She walked through hotel lobbies where workers greeted her with genuine love, not corporate obligation. Everywhere she went, her grandmother's legacy followed her, not as a shadow, but as a crown. Late one evening, she stood alone on the rooftop of her flagship hotel. The city glittered below her. Wind danced through her hair. The empire lights pulsed like a living organism beneath her feet. She thought of her grandmother. She thought of Diane. She thought of the girl she used to be. She thought of Joe, not with pain, but with a distant fondness for the lesson he didn't realize he taught her. Never shrink for love. Never beg for respect. Never apologize for choosing yourself. She whispered softly into the night. I did it. And the city lights seemed to whisper back. You're not done yet. Because queens don't retire. They evolve. Karen didn't just step into her grandmother's legacy. She expanded it, modernized it, turned it into a beacon for millions. And somewhere in another part of the city, Joe Scott helped a teenage boy fill out a job application. A small, quiet act. A stitch in his own healing. Their stories no longer intertwined, but both grew, just separately, as they were meant to. If you believe forgiveness doesn't mean going back, like this video. Comment, healed not returning, if you've ever outgrown someone who hurt you. Share this story to stand against emotional manipulation everywhere. Subscribe if you support women choosing purpose over pain. Thank you for watching this story to the end. Please click subscribe, like, and share this video. Click on the screen to watch the next one.